Approximately 10 new pages of the Daas Tevunos were scanned and sent out. And we're now on page Kuf Aleph. That's what we're up to. It starts a whole new chapter. And we read the first paragraph, page Kuf Aleph 101. For those who are following the paragraph system, we're in paragraph Kuf Chaf Daled 124. Rav Friedlander put a caption, inserted a caption for this paragraph, for this chapter. It's called Metzias Ha'odam Va'avoidosai, man's existence and what is man's avoda? What is his job in this world in his allotted time? So here, the Ramchal, as we mentioned many times, Ramchal has introduced us to so many different concepts. Why the tachlis of the Bria, why the HaKadosh Baruch Hu create the world, lehetiv, or the Gili Hayichud, which again we'll get to understand how both of those reasons are one and the same. Hester Panim, Ha'oris Panim, Guf, Neshama, the Chet of the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, what that was, what that caused, what that continues to cause. And now the Ramchal is going to begin putting all these concepts together to answer very basic questions. What is man doing here? Man's existence and man's avoda, man's job in this existence. Avodas ha'odam, Rav Friedlander writes in the caption, man's work, man's job, tikun ha'chesronot shebo v'sheba bria. Man takes the perfectly imperfect world that God created, and man has the opportunity to perfect that world, and that's his job. His job is Asher Bara Elokim La'asos. In Vayachulu, the last words are Asher Bara Elokim La'asos, that God created La'asos, to do. It doesn't say Asher Bara Elokim, that God created Va'asa, and he created and made in the past tense. It says Asher Bara Elokim La'asos. This is what God created in order to do. And this is Mefarshim tell us, Asher Bara Elokim La'asos tells us that God created for us to do. We are to complete the Bria. We have a lashon that we mentioned many times in Chazal, in Gemara, and Shabbos. Nasa shutuf lakadosh baruch hu b'ma'aseh bereishis. A person has an opportunity to become a partner with the Rebbeinu Shalom in creation. The Rebbeinu Shalom created a perfectly imperfect world, and in that world he inserted man so that man can have the schus of perfecting the world, and through that the Rebbeinu Shalom can give him, and he makes choices, the bechira, and through those choices man can get schar, and therefore that's the tachlis habriya, that the Rebbeinu Shalom could be mative to mankind. And again, we'll talk about the Gilui Hayichud that we learned about and how the Gilui Hayichud Natova become one. So man's job is to take the perfectly imperfect world and to perfect it himself, and obviously work on himself. And through working on himself, he can help perfect the whole Bria. And in the Bria, as the Ramchal writes in the Mesilas Yesharim, if we take a look at footnote 226, Rav Friedlander's footnote 226, this is what the Ramchal says in the Mesilas Yesharim. Parak Aleph Mesilas Yesharim. V'nei samar kadosh baruch hu la'odem b'mokim sherabim boi hamachik noisai mimenu yisparach. The Rebbeinu Shalom placed man in the world where there are many, many things all around man that will distance man from God. It's all over the place. And in 2021, it's everywhere. Wherever you turn, there's some kind of mishagas that can distance chas v'shalom a person, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and a person can fall into a bor tachtiyos. He can fall into a pit. There are all kinds of things out there that seem innocent, that are not innocent, and that takes over the person. And this includes all the base desires of man, which have come out to the fore today all over the world. What was a base desire today is free expression. This is Ramchal speaking still in Mesil Shishorim. Therefore, the Rebbeinu Shalom placed man in a situation where he is in a daily war. Because everything in the world, the finest things in the world, and Chas v'Shalom, the not fine things in the world, are all there to test a person. A person can be living in poverty, and that's a tremendous nisoyed, the Ramchal says, Nasil Sishorim. We should know from such a nisyonis. But at the same time, the Ramchal says, Ashirus. A person can be very wealthy. And wealth is a tremendous nisoyed. What are you going to do with your wealth? How are you going to spend it? And this becomes a nisoyed as well. And Ramchal and Nasil Sishorim quote Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech said, Reish v'osher, don't make me poor, don't make me wealthy. Hatrifeini lechem chuki, Rebbeinu Shalom, just provide me my daily bread. Shlomo Melech understood very well the pitfalls of great wealth. Reish v'osher, don't give me poverty. Hatrifeini or wealth, hatrifeini lechem chuki, take care of me so that I have what I need on a daily basis. So we're in the middle of a war. Life is part of a war. The tools that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us, the Torah, the mitzvahs, these are tools to help us fight that war. And eventually, the neshama is able to take over the guf. We learned about that, and there's a process by which the neshama can even uplift and elevate the guf. So the guf is not such a dark, dense guf, and some light can come into the guf. And the greater a person lifts himself up, the more the guf becomes neshama, until you have like a Moshe Rabbeinu, the Ramchal said, was Koren or Panov. His face had a shine to it. Doesn't mean that his face had beautiful. He had beautiful skin, which I'm sure Moshe Rabbeinu had. I'm sure he had a beautiful complexion, but it means much more than that. It means the light of his neshama was able now to shine through the skin of his face, Koran or Panov, because the density, darkness of the Ofer min Adama, man's body is created dust of the earth. It's dark and dense, and the light of the neshama can't shine through it. And the more the neshama converts the guf into ruchnius, the less dense, the less dark, and the more the neshama can shine through the guf. And so we have a Moshe Rabbeinu Kikoran or Panav. So all these things are in the Bria, and they're in the Bria for us to make decisions. The Rebbeinu Shalom put us in the middle of what the Ramchal called a Milchama Chazaka. It's a very strong war. And in this war, we get to make choices. And those choices end up, if we make them properly, we end up with Schar, the Hatova, and the Tachlis Habriya. Paragraph Kuf Chavdal, Amra Seichel, the Seichel says to the Neshama, I'm going to introduce you to a new principle as an introduction before we get into man's job in this world. Man's existence in this world is built upon the Chachma Elikis, God's eternal wisdom. Le'ein tachlis, it's eternal. It's way beyond anything we can ever imagine or anything we can ever understand. Ki ha'adam baruch hu bara nivroim merabim u'gedolim gavorim al gavorim aleim kulam tzrichim u'mishmardam shem shum dav la'atola. God created the whole world in a hierarchy, one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other, until on Yom HaShishi HaKadosh Baruch Hu created man as the pinnacle of creation. And everything that was created, nothing was created levatola for no reason. Coincidentally, this showed up in the world. Everything has a reason why it was created. Valkol Omed Alapina Hayesodis, everything stands on the principal foundation, Shahu. Mash, and this is the principle. Masha Adam Baruch Hu Reitza Ba'avodas Adam, what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants from man's work, she is saking hu kolach esroine shebebriya, that he should fix, repair all the imperfections in the Bria. And as I always say, when we see this word tikkun, when I'm not talking about the Kabbalistic concept of tikkun, I'm sure the Ramchal may have been alluding to it. We talked about the Ramchal, the prohibition on the Ramchal that was placed there, unfortunately, about his writing Kabbalah. And Ramchal continued writing in a way where his Kabbalistic ideas were put into writing without people generally realizing that he's writing Kabbalah. In fact, Rav Volbe, and I believe it's noted in the beginning of some of the Alei Shurs, in the beginning of some of the Mesilas Yesharim, that Ramchal's greatest work of Kabbalah is the Mesilas Yesharim. Although when you read the Mesilas Yesharim, it doesn't sound like Kabbalah at all. It sounds like a Musa Sefer. And if you read, for example, the Kalach, the Kuf Lamed Ches of the Ramchal, it's Kabbalah. And other Sforim, the Ramchal wrote that a Kabbalah. But yet the Mesilas Yesharim is Rav Volbe, I believe, said, is the greatest work of Kabbalah, the Ramchal, and this is because he wrote the Mesilas Yesharim in an environment in which he was prohibited by the Beis Din to write Kabbalah any longer for reasons that we discussed at that time. But when we're learning the Daas Tevunos, we're learning it not on the level of Kabbalah. We're learning it as how do you fix the world, the perfectly imperfect world. There's enough imperfections out there. There's enough chaos out there that we all recognize that we don't need to get into the spheres to figure out what the problems in the world are. They're slapping us in the face every moment. So the Ramchal is telling us here that the Rebbeinu Shalom create a perfectly imperfect world. You add the Mesilas Yesharim to that. The perfectly imperfect world is a war zone for the human being. And in that war zone, the human being is given the opportunity to make decisions to complete, perfect, repair the world. V'yala atzma ilu acha ilu, ilu acha ilu. He will raise himself up from one level to the next level to the next level. Ad sheyidbak b'kedushasa yisparach, until man actually connects, has a devekus b'Hashem, and that is a discussion in the Mesilas Yesharim. The Vekus B'Hakadosh Baruch Hu, early on in the Mesilas Yesharim, the Mesilas Yesharim talks about the Tachlis, what is the greatest schar that a person can have. The Vekus B'Hakadosh Baruch Hu, connecting with the life source, connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sometimes he uses the word Shleimus, sometimes he uses the word Vekus, and that's a discussion itself, the Vekus versus Shleimus. And early on in the Sefer, the Daas Tevunos, Rav Friedlander had a footnote about the Vekus and Shleimus. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put in this world all kinds of things that can distance a person from God. HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well put into the world all kinds of things that would help you would help a person be drawn close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And all these things are very deep and very powerful. And all these things will eventually unfold until the whole world gets to the point of Shleimus Kloli, the general completion, perfection of the world. Okay, so now let's go to Rav Friedlander's next caption. Habriya dome lemareches galgalim hamufelis al yidei avodas haneshama v'hanistara b'mata hagashmi. The Ramchal is now going to talk about what, in the words of the Ramchal, kononiot. And this is a very, very, very central concept to the Ramchal's view of how the world works. And of course, Ramchal didn't make these things up. He's developing these ideas from prior sources, many which come from Kisvei Arizal. And the Ramchal uses a word, he's going to use it in a few lines, kononios. Kononios means gears. In an old-time watch, today, when you open the back of a watch, they put a battery in, take a battery out. In the old-time watches had gears. And people bought expensive watches because the gears worked better. The gears, one gear moved another gear, which moved another gear. The second gear, when it was appropriately calibrated, moved the minute gear. And when that was appropriately calibrated, moved the hour gear. So the watch was on time. If the watch wasn't well made, your watch would run fast, your watch would run slow because the gears were not calibrated properly. So the seconds may be moving a little too fast, and therefore the minutes are moving a little too fast, and therefore the hour could be moving a little too fast. Eventually the watches became fancy, and they had the day of the month on it. So the seconds had to move the minute had to move the hour. 24 hours later, it would move a gear that moved the date. All this was based on gears, and people spent a tremendous amount of money. There were Longines watches, all kinds of watches where people talked about the gears, that the component parts of this watch are Swiss made, they're precision made, they lose a second every year. And that's how people talked about watches. Today, we don't have this really concept of gears. Maybe they still have watches that have gears. You open the back of a watch and there's a battery in it. Okay. The Ramchal is going to now develop this idea of gears. And the idea is that man, through his actions or inactions, actually controls the world. Man is the gear that gets other things to move or not to move in the right direction or to move Hashem in the wrong direction. Man is the active force in this world. So the Ramchal says, V'omnom, at the bottom of page Kuf Aleph, however, Ratzah ha'ratzon ha'elyon, the Ribono Shel Olam's will was, Shetiyeh yad ha'odam magas, that man's action should reach, L'chol ha'rabim, L'chol ha'inyonim ha'rabim ha'ela, all these things, in other words, all the good things that can bring you close to the Ribono Shel Olam, all Hashem, the other things that can distance you from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they're all in this world, and man can move them. He can make these things that bring a person closer to Hashem, he can activate them, or he can activate the other things. Man is the gear that makes the whole thing run. Elu kononiot, gidolot, and these are big gears, ku'ulogin hazeh, like a watch, or no login, a watch, she'ofanav poksha zubazu, that the gears have little, we call them sticks or little pins. The gears are basically a circle, and around the circle there are little pins, and each pin touches the pins as they move, touch the pins on the next gear. Kach kosher ha'odem baruch hu kol briyoso kshorim gedolim. The same way HaKadosh Baruch Hu put the whole world together. Each part of the world is connected to another part. V'hakol kosher ba'odem, and everything is connected into man. Man activates the world. If the world turns for the worse, it's because man turned it to the worse. Man is the gear that activates everything happening in the world. If the world takes a turn for the better, it's because man activated it that way. Turning to page Kuf Beis, man becomes the engine through his deeds that turn the world. Everything turns based upon what man does. The Ribono Shel Olam covered all this up. If man understood how significant everything he does in the world is, then man would be much more careful with what he does. If man understood clearly that as he utters Lashon Hara, or when he does Chas v'Shalom and Aveira, he's affecting the whole world. He would not do certain things, and he would do other things if he fully understood it. It was clear. This comes back to the discussion we had from the Pachad Yitzchak in Bereshis, when we were learning the Bereshis shir, that the Rebbeinu Shalom had to create the world in such a way where there's a hastara, where you don't see things clearly, because if everything was clear, what we call the Midas Hadin, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Bereshis Bo Elokim, at the beginning, God created, and it says Elokim the Midas Hadin, and Rashi comments that originally God planned to create and sustain the world on din, and then he saw that the world cannot be sustained that way, and he added Midas Harachamim, compassion, into the world. We're not going back into those shiurim, but I need to always, when we say this Rashi, it doesn't mean that God, chas v'sholom, had second thoughts. It does not mean he originally wanted to create the world like this, then he realized it's not going to work, and he added some compassion. Rebbe Shalom Hashem was not making a vegetable soup, and he realized there wasn't enough salt in it, so later he had to put enough additional salt because he didn't make it right the first time. Chas v'sholom. We talked about the Rashi, and we talked about the Pshat in the Rashi. But that's what Rashi says. And Rafutne explains the reason why the Rebbeinu Shalom, the world is not sustainable with Midas Hadin, because Midas Hadin means off with his head. It means din. It means as soon as someone does something wrong, he's immediately disciplined. In a world like that, everybody's watching. This person's Machal Shabbos, later he gets struck down by lightning. This person does this, he's struck down by lightning. Eventually, people do not have Bechira. They're going to be Shemet Torah mitzvahs because they're scared about being struck by lightning. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't immediately punish. And by this, people are onlookers. They say, oh, he's getting away with this, and he's getting away with this, and he's getting away with this. Maybe Chas Shalom, there is no God. Maybe Chas Shalom, there is no Onish. And therefore, we get the opportunity to make choice about how we want to run our lives. Now, the Rebbeinu Shalom covered all these things up so that we would have choices with the flesh, the dense guf, and that's what the Ramchal now says. It's a cover-up. HaKadosh Baruch Hu covered everything up with the flesh and the meat of the Gashmias that's on the human being, his guf that comes off him in Adama. It covers up the truth, and therefore he has to search for the truth. He has to find the truth. It's not just a given. The only thing that you can see with your superficial eyes is the level of the guf. You see the guf, the superficial guf. We always talk about Rabbi Akiva's eyes that pierce the shell, that pierce the superficiality, but you need to have that kind of eyes. You need to have those kind of eyes. So Rebbeinu Shalom covered this up. If man really fully understood that everything he says and everything he does tilts the world, and this is a Gemara in Kedushin, the Rambam quotes in Hilchos Tshuva, a person should always think of himself and the world as being perfectly balanced. It's mamish balanced. If you do a mitzvah right now, the whole world will be lekaf zechus. You turn the scales to merit. If Chashom you do an averu, you turn the whole world lekaf choiva. You turn the world to chas v'sholom, a disaster. Now, this doesn't mean a human being, a yid, should walk around in a state of chas v'sholom anxiety or anticipatory anxiety, whatever they want to call it. A person should chas v'sholom not walk around like, oh my God, if I do this, the whole world's going to get destroyed. The person needs to understand his chashivas, the godless, or what Rav Wolbe calls the roimamus ha'adam. Person needs to understand that he's not a fish. Remember, when we learned the Ramban last week on Thursday, the Ramban said that there's one of the three major apikourses in Egypt that had to be completely destroyed, was this apikoursis that man is about as important as a fish, right? Man is a goldfish. When you compare, it's a fruma apikoursis. When you compare man to God, which you can't compare at all, man is about as important as a goldfish. It doesn't mean anything to the Baruch Shalom. Yes, yes, no, no. Even if everything implodes, God will exist. But this is an apikursis because God decided that man is going to be such a critical part of this world that man will repair and complete the perfectly imperfect world. But this is covered up so that we would think, and when we look with our superficial eyes, we think that the guf is the most important thing. And this is so that we don't always understand the truth about the importance of our very existence. And only a human being, a yid that studies Torah, can understand the importance of everything he does and everything he says, and even everything he thinks, the importance of these things, and how it affects not just him, it affects a whole world. Ach, the Ramchal says, Be'emes Dvorim Begav. Forget about the superficiality. Beyond the superficiality, underneath the surface, great things are there. Kononius Gedolos, these great gears. Shabor HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'ilomai, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in the world. Letzorach ha'inyan hazeh kuloi, lemasa v'avoidasoi, liyula hu l'toisus b'ushasoi, or l'bidasoi u'pechisusoi, chas v'sholem, v'chol matzav v'harabim. The Rebbeinu Shalom created all the system of kononius, that man he does, man he says, man he thinks is going to affect everything that's going on in the world because he's a gear. Man is the first gear. When he turns it, he turns the whole world in a certain direction. He can lift up the world. He can bring down the world, chas v'sholem. And this occurs rak al yedei haneshama b'chol chalakea b'sharashea asher kol al bagufay. And this is only done through all the different parts and facets of the neshama and the roots of the neshama. This is where the world turns. We think the world turns through what people do by their bodies, and that's a superficial view of the world. The real gears that are turning are through the neshama. What the neshama does to the body is the neshama elevating the body. If the neshama is elevating the body, the neshama is elevating the world. If the body is causing the neshama to shrivel, so to speak, then the world will go into chaos and shrivel. So the neshama is really the center of it all. The neshama is the gear that makes everything run, the whole world, and each of us has a place in that world that no one else can do what needs to be done. People are sent to the world with a specific mission, and that's what they need to do in the world, and they have that gear to get that done in the world. Stop here for today. And this is a very central concept in understanding both how the world operates according to the Ratzon Hashem and the importance, the Reimamus Ha'adam. All Yidden need Yeshua, so have Yeshua, so Yidden Refuah, shall Refuah, so Yidden Nechama, shall Nechama, so Yidden Bracha, shall Bracha, so Baruch Shalom should send Hatova to Klal Yisrael. Baruch Shalom should be masakin humanity. We're working on the Gili Hayichud. We understand that Yeshua's Refuahs, Nechamas, and Brachas can only come through the Baruch Shalom, the Echad, Yachad, and Yuchad. When we understand this and internalize this, and we live it, and we do this Gili Hayichud process, and we donate that Gili Hayichud process to Klal Yisrael, to the world, and through that, the Baruch Shalom, through that, the critical mass of Gili Hayichud that mankind can accomplish will happen. The Baruch Shalom send Mashiach Tzidkeinu B'Ratzon Hashem Mamish today to finish that process, so we can be Zoicha to a world that's completed, a world that's B'Shleimus, a world that will be a world of the Beis Hamikdash, a world of Maxis HaShekel, a world of Karbonis, a world of Avodas Hashem, B'Ritzayin Hashem Mamish today. Before Shalema Moshe Gzelig Ben Razel, Yosef Chaim Ben Shoshana Menucha, L'chol Choli HaKorona, B'Sok Shar Choli Yisrael, Force Never Force Aguf, Hashla Kalos Mankriv Memor Amen. My wife mentioned to me today that several women joined Tehillim group. She noticed it on the Tehillim list. We spoke about that last week. Everybody Take your 5 minutes, your 10 minutes a day, set a time. This is my Tehillim time. It's my Tehillim time for those who are sick, Chole Corona, and all the others that are sick. It's my time to daven HaKadosh Baruch Hu for Baruch Shalom. L'sakin olam b'malchus shakai, we say in Aleinu al Kein Akava, the Baruch Shalom should already complete the repairing of the world so that we can leave the state of chaos and the whole world will worship the Rebbeinu Shalom. Say that in Tehillim, be mispala for all these for that wonderful world that we're looking forward to. The Baruch Shalom should bring it upon us. Take your 5, your 10 minutes a day and say Tehillim, be mispala HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kadosh Baruch Hu is always open to Tefillah. We should be mispala for these things. More people join Tehillim groups. More people set out time to say Tehillim. The Baruch Shalom Shem Mashiach Tzidkeinu Meher B'Yameinu B'Tzayin Hashem Mamish today. And the Mitzvah tomorrow will begin at 9:30 with the Yeshaya Hanavi Shir. Everybody have a wonderful day. Be careful, be safe. Go to the places you need to go to. Refrain from going to places you don't need to go to. And even the places you go to, figure out what time there are less people, it's safer, etc. These cheshbonis are a mitzvah, it's avodas Hashem. Last 2 Beis Yosefs and Choshen Mishpat, last Ber Hagoyel and Choshen Mishpat. Everybody stay safe, be well, and have a wonderful day. Sei gesund.